What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Sailboat with Sailboat Supplies, and this is another episode of Sailboat's Restorations. This is the first pair that I'll be working on for 2022, and the pair in question got some Black Cement Jordan 3s from 2011. Now the uppers on these shoes are actually in pretty good condition, however the midsoles, the paint is chipping substantially, and on the outsoles, they're pretty dirty with a little bit of yellow going on. I'm going to be giving these a nice deep clean, a midsole repaint, and potentially even de-yellowing the rubber toe caps and the rubber outsoles. Let's take a closer look at this pair so you can see the before view, and then we'll get into the process of cleaning them up. So taking a closer look at this pair of Black Cements, we'll look at the right shoe first, and you can see that the toe cap is a bit yellowed there. Around the midsoles, obviously that paint is cracking pretty damn good, and you can see a couple of scuff marks, just some dirt on the uppers there. Coming over to the heel of the shoe, continued paint cracking, and just some general debris on the shoes that needs to be cleaned off. Over on the medial side is where you see the majority of the paint cracking, especially right along the arch of the foot there. But again, the uppers look in really good condition. Left shoe, a little bit more of the same. We got that yellowing and dirt on the toe cap there. A little bit of cracking on the lateral side of the shoe. Coming over to the heel, again, just some generalized scuffing and dirt with a bunch of paint cracking on the midsoles, especially as we get over to the arch of the foot there. On both shoes, you can see there's some pretty substantial drag, but there's still a lot of life left in the soles of these shoes. They're just really dirty at this point in time. Overall, they don't look horrible, but they definitely need a little bit of work to them. Now that you guys have seen the before view, it's time to hop into cleaning these bad boys up so we can prep them for a repaint. Let's get down to it.
For the cleaning process, you could basically use any sort of sneaker cleaner that you're comfortable with. The most important part is making sure that you're utilizing the appropriate brush for the right surfaces. So for this project, I utilized a stiff bristle brush for the outsoles and a soft bristle brush for the uppers and midsoles.
Now that I have these Black Cement 3s totally cleaned up, they're looking absolutely amazing. But it's time to get down to stripping the paint off of the midsoles so I can begin my midsole repaint. Let's get into the preparation process and get that going.
So there are definitely a number of different ways to strip paint off of the midsoles. One of my preferred methods is actually using pottery tools. A lot of pottery sculpting tools will have blades that are just sharp enough to take off the vinyl paint off of Jordan 3s and Jordan 4s without actually damaging the midsoles. Now, of course, with shoes that have textured midsoles, this won't work quite as well because you could potentially cut into the texture and remove it from the midsoles. For this application, it worked out absolutely perfectly, and you can see that I actually was able to take off the black paint in a single strip. I was able to remove about 90% of the midsole paint utilizing just my pottery tools, but for the remaining paint that was stuck in the nooks and crannies, I utilized pointed Q-tips along with premium denatured alcohol from 15-7 Restorations. The reason why I use denatured alcohol is because I found that it's a lot more mild on the midsoles of shoes, and it causes a lot less damage, pouring, and pitting. Because of this, I try to use it over acetone, so then that way I'll have a much smoother surface for when I go to repaint my kicks.
So I'm making some pretty good headway on these Black Cement 3s. At this point in time, I got the midsoles completely stripped of all of the midsole paint. Very interesting process. I was able to actually peel off the entire strip of black paint in one go on one of the shoes. Kind of strange to be working with vinyl paints like that, but hey, it was also pretty cool. It's now time to actually get to the repaint, so I'm going to prep them up, get some tape on these shoes, and start to paint them up.
One thing that I would highly recommend is that you don't skimp on the type of tape that you use. Unfortunately for this project, I only had some old generic masking tape and it did not work out quite as nicely as I wanted. I utilized a vinyl weeding tool to help to tuck the tape into some of the tight nooks and crannies to make sure that all of the parts of the shoe that I didn't want to get paint on were going to be covered. Once I had the shoes completely taped up, it was time to paint them. I started off with 3 base coats of white paint, which is unfortunately my least favorite part about these kinds of projects because white paint just takes forever and you need to add so many layers in order to get it looking nice and full. You'll see that I did 3 layers of paint before I even thought about applying any of the black paint down, and you'll see there were a couple of spots that I actually hand brushed too to fill the pores in a little bit better. After laying down my base layers of white paint, I taped off the section of the shoe that I needed to airbrush black. For the first layer of black paint, I actually utilized a deep gray, so then that way when I did transition over to my black paint, it would have a much fuller look to it. After applying several layers of black paint utilizing my airbrush, I saw that there were some rougher areas and some pores that needed to be sanded down, so I utilized a 1200 grit sandpaper in order to smooth those surfaces out. Afterwards, I hand painted those surfaces so that they would be nice and even before I finished applying my black paint using my airbrush. Once I had finished off the black sections of the midsole, it was time to tape those off so I could finish off the white sections of the midsole. You'll notice that I actually did a whole bunch of hand painting during this part because there were some pores that needed to be filled, so I utilized a little bit of a thicker white paint to help to get a little deeper into those pores. Luckily, there were no real rough sections, so I didn't end up having to sand anything on the white sections of the midsole, but those pores did need to be filled. In the future, I can definitely use leather filler or Raleigh's Restoration's scratch resistant sealer to help to fill the pores, but because they weren't terribly deep, the white hand paint actually worked pretty well and created a nice smooth surface while still maintaining the integrity of the paint job. Like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately I didn't use the best masking tape in the world, so my lines didn't come out quite as sharp as I wanted them to be, so I ended up doing a little bit of hand painting just to kind of sharpen the lines up a little bit, and it worked out pretty well.
Alright guys, repaint is officially done. It's time to strip off all of the tape and protective layers, and let's take a closer look and see how these bad boys turned out.
Tape removal is one of the most fun but nerve-wracking parts of the process because if you messed anything up and have to redo all of your prep work, it's a huge pain in the ass. One thing that I would recommend is utilizing an X-Acto knife to help to cut some of the paint edges that have gone over onto the tape, so then that way you don't pull up any of your paint during the tape removal process.
So here we are guys, we got the finished product for these Black Cement 3s, and overall things are looking pretty good. I will say this is the best repaint that I've ever done, although I still have a lot of learning to do and still a lot of obstacles to overcome. Taking a look at the right shoe, things look pretty solid. There's a couple of small little pores that were very challenging to fill in, and I probably could have used some like leather filler or leather repair. One thing that you'll notice that's kind of pissing me off is that the line between the white and the black is not as sharp as it could be. Unfortunately, I was using some old masking tape and it's just not the best masking tape in the world. So it didn't make these edges quite as clean as they could have been. But overall, it looks pretty solid. The surfaces are really nice and smooth for the most part. The lateral side of the shoe, there are just a couple of small spots with the black paint that I'm gonna need to touch up ever so slightly. Checking out the left shoe, as we look at the lateral side here, you can see some small pits and pores, but they're really not too terrible and they really don't detract too much from the look of the shoe. Again, this line between the black and the white is just not quite as sharp as I wanted it to be. And I think that's just because of the masking tape that I was using. It's just old tape that wasn't sticking that well and it's really not that high quality tape. But the nice part is the medial arch area right here is looking super clean. Overall, it's looking a lot better than it was to begin with, and this paint job is holding up super well. It's flexing really nice, and I know that I had really even coats of paint, Alright guys, that'll do it for this restoration project on these black cement 3s right here. Obviously I still got a little bit of practice to do, but the good news is I'm getting better with every single repaint that I do. This is easily the cleanest one that I've done so far, and I definitely learned a couple of things that I can do to improve next time I have a repainting project. Overall, I'm incredibly happy with the results. I'm really looking forward to the next repainting project that I have coming in. Even if this one was mildly frustrating with all of the mishaps that happened along the way, this is just a step in the right direction. If you guys are interested in seeing any of the inventory that I have for sale right now, or are interested in seeing any of my previous customization or restoration work, make sure that you check out the website at www.sailboatsupplies.xyz. You can also find me on Instagram at Sailboat Supplies. If you guys enjoyed the content of this video, please help supporting the channel by liking and subscribing by clicking those buttons right below the video there. That's going to help me to continue to generate content for this channel and keep things moving forward. As always, appreciate you guys that stuck around until the cold, bitter end of this video. I'm Sailboat, and I'm out of here.